Sure.
All right, so here we go. Welcome back, Pastor Aaron,
Hey,
and good to have you. I am, as always, Father Dan Strubicki, and we are representing downtown Corfu, I guess.
that's it.
And we thought that as we approach Palm Sunday, this coming Sunday, and talk a little bit about maybe what Palm Sunday means in our different traditions and how we celebrate it. But then I think we're going to talk about Matthew 21, 1 through 11.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
that what we agreed? All
I think
right.
so. That's what I'm prepared to
All
give
right.
out
Okay. I
anyway.
don't want to be like, surprise, we're doing Isaiah. No. So, yeah. Why don't you start us out again? Do you want to read through it, or you want? Well,
How
why don't
about
you,
let's take turns? I
all
read
right.
it
All
last
right.
time.
All
You
right.
read it this time.
Okay. So from Matthew's Gospel here. When Jesus and the disciples drew near Jerusalem and came to Bethphage on the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent two disciples, saying to them, "Go into the village opposite you, and immediately you will find an ass tethered and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them here to me. And if anyone should say to you, reply, 'The master has need of them,' then he will send them at once." This happened so that what had been spoken through the prophet might be fulfilled. "Say to daughter Zion, behold, your king comes to you, meek, and riding on an ass, and on a colt, the foal of a beast of burden." The disciples went and did as Jesus had ordered them. They brought the ass and the colt and laid their cloaks over them, and he sat upon them. The very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road, while others cut branches from the trees and strewed them on the road. The crowds preceding him and those following kept crying out and saying, "Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest." And when he entered Jerusalem, the whole city was shaken and asked, "Who is this?" And the crowds replied, "This is Jesus the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee." The gospel of the Lord. Now, I had to hesitate here. I believe I'm looking at a typo in the text, which I've never actually seen before on this website. So, of course, I make a video, and there's a typo on the official bishop's website. The text literally reads, "Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is the He who comes in the name of the Lord." So, either the one or he, probably not both. Doesn't really make that much of a difference. But I guess we could talk about typos in the history of the Bible, or errant
Yeah, right,
scribes, and how that's
right, right.
impacted things. Um, but anyway,
Funny.
so as before, folks, if you're watching this video and as you read through it, if there's anything that grabs your attention, that's often where I start. Mention something in the comments below. Pause the video if you want to reflect on the gospel yourself, and then want to go for it, Aaron? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So last time I kind of mentioned a little bit of my process
Mm-hmm.
when I'm writing a sermon, and so that first part of my process involves asking why this lectionary text is here to begin with. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so, I mean, obviously, Palm Sunday, of course, this is why it's the text. But I wanted to ask you a
Mm-hmm.
question,
Yeah.
because I mean, in the Protestant lectionary, we have the option of the texts for Palm Sunday or Passion Sunday, and they're
Mm-hmm.
they're a set of different texts. I don't know why there are two sets of text. I just don't know.
Uh-huh.
I would almost never use the lections from Passion Sunday, and I just wonder, just from your perspective, from your tradition, when would you use the Passion texts from this Sunday in the liturgical calendar?
It's a fun question. So I guess a little bit on how our liturgy is structured, and I think that'll partly answer the question. So, um, for Palm Sunday, there's several different ways to begin it. There's like a solemn entrance and a simple entrance, and but you're sort of supposed to, if you're pulling out all the stops, you gather somewhere outside of your normal church space, and you've got like a little mini liturgy, because what you're trying to recreate is the sense of the procession. You're entering into Jerusalem, or entering into the temple, entering into the church. So people gather somewhere else. At seminary, we would gather in the cafeteria or our refectory, and then palms are distributed, like physical palms. So I've got mine. I've got mine here. So I was doing a video on this earlier, and then there's at that place there's like a song that's sung, and then the Palm Sunday reading is done that I just read, and then the idea is like we're all entering into the church, and then Mass proceeds sort of as usual. So there's this gospel that belongs to that little mini liturgy, that little opening liturgy, and then if you go down, it's very easy for me. I'm just scrolling down on the website, but whatever you've got where you're at. So then Isaiah would be at the Mass, and then there's a second reading, a New Testament reading, like you would too, and then now you actually get the Passion for the gospel, and that's quite lengthy. Usually, it's broken up by people taking on different parts or roles, and it is sort of odd. I almost wish that we could leave that we could focus this just on Palm Sunday, and that we could do the Passion on Good Friday, and really focus it on that day. But maybe the thought is that you're not going to get enough people into the Triduum. The Triduum is, I don't know, but we basically wind up doing both.
Yeah,
it's a fun weekend. There's a lot going on. So I kind of
so all of that happens on a Sunday morning Mass.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
So I've never been a part of a Protestant church where that has happened kind of in the same service. It's almost like, Palm Sunday is only about the triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem, and then like that's it. The rest of the Passion narrative doesn't really become a part of sort of public worship until later in Holy Week. So that's interesting that all happens.
How well attended would you say are those later celebrations in your experience?
Not very well attended. So that's actually interesting, right? Because if you think about a lot of people's experience in, I mean, if we are including Palm Sunday into sort of Holy Week, right? That what people often experience, so if you come to worship on Palm Sunday and then nothing else until Easter Sunday, it's sort of these, these
you're
these very
only the high points.
These very like positive moments of the life of Jesus, and you kind of miss this big important dip in between. It's kind of like
flatten the curve.
Right. So that's interesting, and I don't know, maybe that's something we can learn from the Catholic liturgy.
I don't know if this was if they're like deliberately trying to solve this problem and sort of being pragmatic about it. I've always felt it was odd to try to fit both into Sunday. It really feels like you're really pushing, and then you're preaching. It's already a long service, so how you cover. You've got so much more scripture to cover than usual too. You really wind up. I think a lot of times I hear people focus on the contrast between that peak and that valley. And, you might talk, we'll get into this, I'm sure, a little bit once we dive into the passage itself, but the irony that's going on here, the contrast between the two, it's all good stuff. But, trying to do it all at the same time it's a lot.
Yeah, a lot. There's multiple chapters to get through, which is a lot. Well, that's cool. Thanks for filling me in on that. So here are just some thoughts that I have about this passage. Palm Sunday, this is sort of a recent development for me. It is one of my favorite parts of the life of Jesus.
Oh, really?
I mean, Easter is obviously kind of the central part. But Palm Sunday is interesting. I think there's so much rhetorically and theologically that's here. And so what I mean by that is, here's Jesus like walking or riding into the city of Jerusalem through the city gates, right? I mean, that's how you have to get into the city. You have to go uh, through the gates because it's walled. And but it's like travel in the ancient world happened on foot. Jesus probably, I mean, John tells us that Jesus was in Jerusalem multiple times before this, final week of his life. If we think about his presentation at the temple, we think about
Mm-hmm.
his time when he was 12 years old, being there at the temple. I mean, he probably had a bar mitzvah, right? I mean, at the temple, he probably went to his relatives' bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs at the temple.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't the first time he was there, and
Mm-hmm.
you can certainly go into the city of Jerusalem on foot. So why does Jesus want to go into the city on a donkey? That's my first question. And I think for me, I think Jesus is trying to be a little clever here. I think Jesus is trying to contrive a situation. I think Jesus has Zechariah chapter
Mm-hmm.
9, verse 9 in mind,
Mm-hmm.
and he is wanting to signal something to the people in Jerusalem. And I think what he's doing, this is my opinion here, this is my interpretation. I think he's testing them. Um, I think he wants to see how they respond.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a common narrative, and I think this is true, right? We often talk about Palm Sunday as you know in relationship to Good Friday, that it's like, Good Friday, here are all these people who just, a few days before were, hailing Jesus as the Messiah, and now here they are yelling,
Fair weather
crucify him,
friends.
right?
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
but and we kind of maybe think about that, excuse the crying baby in the
Not
background.
a problem. Another difference
Um,
between Protestant and Catholic
sure.
ministers.
uh, so yeah, it's hard to find a quiet space, but it's good.
I appreciate you
So
doing this very much. Thank you.
yeah, yeah. Um, but we think of maybe that change in their outlook on who Jesus is as maybe a development later in the week, as
Mm-hmm.
a sort of misunderstanding, or their hopes were dashed. I think from even Palm Sunday we can see they misunderstand, and here's what I mean by that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the fact that they are even saying what they're saying. They are, saying Hosanna in the highest, right? Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is the He who comes in the name of the Lord, right? This is straight out of Psalm 118, and Psalm 118 is a psalm that is anticipating this, uh, you know,
Mm.
this messianic priestly king of of the Old Testament, right? The expectation of the Messiah as a priest king, and I think that's what they see in Jesus. They're seeing him as, here comes like the king. But I think even from that moment, uh, we see that they misunderstand. And I think so if Jesus is testing them, their response to him from that very beginning is telling him they don't understand what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Because if Jesus were coming the way they are saying he's coming, by quoting Psalm 118, saying Hosanna to the Son of David,
Mm-hmm.
he wouldn't be riding a donkey, he would be riding a war horse. A
Mm.
donkey is the animal of a time of peace. And so even when you read the rest of, they're quoting, or rather Matthew is quoting from Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9. So what he's quoting in Zechariah, it says, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter Zion, shout aloud, O daughter Jerusalem. Lo, your king comes to you triumphant, victorious is he, humble and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." The very next verse, right? It's not quoted in our passage from Matthew, but in Zechariah, the very next verse says, "He," referring to the king riding on the donkey, "will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the war horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow shall be cut off, and he shall command peace to the nations. His dominion shall be from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth." The passage from Zechariah is looking forward to a time not of conquest, but a time of peace. And I think what
Mm-hmm.
Jesus is trying to signal to the people in Jerusalem is, here I am to make peace with the enemy, right? To make peace with our enemy. And what they are saying is, here you come to conquer our enemy. And I
Mm-hmm.
think what Jesus is doing is testing them. Do you understand why I am here? I am not here to overthrow the Romans. I am here because I want to I want to save them as much as I want to save you, O people of Israel. I want to save them from their incessant need to conquer through violence. Like, I want to save them. I'm here to make peace with them as much as I am here to make peace with you as well. And to me, this is just an interesting passage, for that reason, that we see that Jesus is coming to make peace, and that is kind of his message, right?
Mm-hmm.
His message to the people of Israel, the message to anyone who kind of takes him seriously, is that if we expect him to come in this way that is sort of, trying to conquer the enemy through violence or through upheaval, then I think we'll be disappointed. I think what Jesus does is conquer through making peace, right? Through,
Yeah.
I think the way I think it's C.S. Lewis who puts it this way about taming the beast, right? Like, that's what Jesus came to do, to tame the beast, right? If the beast is sin, then what Jesus came to do is tame it. And I think that's, tame the beast inside of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what Jesus came to do. So,
And you see
uh,
that all throughout the Passion narrative, that he's still, forgiving people and reconciling and caring for other people. There's always that focus on others. So even though it seems like he's losing, in a sense, he's losing his bodily integrity, he's losing his safety, he's still true to his mission, to his sense of what he is about. So there's some things in life we can't control, that get taken away from us, but who we choose to be is always important. So yeah,
mhm.
the meek thing really resonated with me as well as I was looking through
Yeah,
it.
how do you see this passage?
Um, this will come up sometimes in funerals. The Beatitudes. Somebody wants to do the Beatitudes, and almost inevitably, I find myself drawn to this idea of blessed are the meek, because my default brain for someone that's meek is, I think of someone that's like really shy and bashful, kind of like the librarian archetype, and leave me alone with my quiet books. And I identify with that a little bit. I've got a lot of books behind me. I've got a lot of tech stuff here. I'm always happy to be, doing my own thing. But when Jesus is praising these qualities, I think it has to be something that we could find in anybody, that anybody could aspire to, and it has to be something that we find in Jesus himself. And so you don't see him, you do see him, I think, seeking out the quiet, seeking out those times of prayer, seeking out that time in the desert, seeking out that time on the mountaintop. But you don't see him shying away from doing what needs to be done. And so particularly when it's like contradicting what the Pharisees are trying to do, or pointing out their hypocrisy. So I think for me, the more I've reflected on this over the years, someone who is meek is someone that's able to set aside their own interests to take care of someone else. That's sort of the humble quality that we see. And so, kind of tying into what you said here, the sense of the meek is what caught my attention. I mean, we're hearing over and over again about what particular animal he's riding. I mean, there's like 3 ways we can phrase this. It's an ass, it's a colt, it's the foal, a beast of burden. Like, okay, we get it, But that's not the most important thing, even though that's talked a lot about. People are seeing this and they're like, oh my gosh, look, it's the guy on the donkey. He's going to be the king. But, like, how is he on the donkey? And, like, what more than what he has or where he is, like, what kind of a person is he? And he is a meek person. That's the kind of king that he is. And I don't know if you saw Good Omens, when that came out a little while ago. But there's a moment where the characters are there by the cross, and it says, why are they killing him? He says, oh, told them to be kind to one another. So, oh, that'll do it, you know. Um, so there's, I think there's that meekness that's so important here, but it is the very opposite of a conqueror who forces his will on other people through force. Um, he's not out to do that. He's not out with the bow and the chariot and the horse. He's coming in meekness to be good to other people and to encourage them to do the same.
Hmm. I was thinking of the same connection to the Beatitudes, just with that word kind of being the connector,
Mm-hmm.
meek.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about that beatitude in particular, right? Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. I think I think one way to even look at that passage, right? Because that's often translated as they will inherit the earth, and that
Mm-hmm.
word in um, in Greek, right, for earth is the word ge, and
Hmm.
ge is also how not just the earth. I mean, it also refers to the earth, and sometimes it does mean that, right, sort of the globe. Um, but it also means the land, and often in reference to the land of Israel in particular. And I think it could be that what Jesus is trying to sort of tip his hearers off to in a time in history where there are um, there are a you know a few different Jewish sects, right?
Mm-hmm.
SECTS, and
Mm-hmm.
um, one of them being the Zealots, right? That how
Yeah.
how you how you bring about God's will for God's people is through taking up the sword and forcing it upon the earth, and overthrowing
Simon the
your
Zealot. You
oppressors.
see a little bit of that
Yeah,
violence in the Gospels,
yeah.
even. Yeah.
And I think what Jesus might be saying here is no, 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 no. Blessed are the meek, for
Mm-hmm.
they will inherit the land. Right? If you want to come into possession of what it is that God desires for you, you don't get it through taking matters into your own hands and forcing it, but
Mm-hmm.
through letting go, through allowing God to give it to you in sort of God's timing and God's way, rather than forcing it upon yourself. I think I think there's something about that, right? And like you're saying about the kind of person that Jesus was and is, that you know, being someone who is is humble, is gentle, is meek, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a more notable characteristic about him than the fact that he's riding into the city on whatever animal you want to think of. But that meekness, I think, is a way
Mm-hmm.
of thinking about it. Richard Rohr, who I like a
Mm-hmm.
lot.
Mm-hmm.
He he talks about um, spirituality, great spirituality. We sort of have a sort of awakening in one of two ways: through the path of great suffering,
Hmm.
or through the path of great love. In other words, um, great spirituality is always about letting go. And what
Hmm.
happens through the path of great suffering is suffering sort of forces us to let go by inflicting some hardship on us.
Hmm.
Um, but often people find a a new sense of God's presence in their lives when they've experienced suffering. I think because of
Mm-hmm.
having let go of something that was maybe taking up space in their lives, um, that was distracting them. I'm not trying to say that God inflicts suffering in order to uh, bless people in some way. I don't think
Yeah.
that's what that means. But I think oftentimes our eyes are opened as a result of having gone through something difficult.
It's
But
that's very true. So many of the great saints through history. I mean, Francis of Assisi is one I admire very much, and some of his change happens through periods of illness or imprisonment. The
Mm,
founder of the Jesuits, sort of same, recovering from an illness or an injury and surgery, and so yeah, it's a common theme that so many of the saints seem to find their way into spirituality on a sickbed.
yeah.
So
Well, and I think what Richard Rohr would say is we don't have to wait until suffering forces us to let go
right,
before
yeah.
before before we let go. And I think that's what he means by, there is the path of great suffering, but there's also the path of great love,
Mm,
that we
really good.
can find God in the letting go by our own volition, right? We can choose to let go and try to perceive what God is doing. And I think that's part of what is happening here with that word meekness and humble,
Mm-hmm.
in our passage, that this is who Jesus is, one who sort of let go of even his own life out of a great love. And it's that sort of path that we are, as his followers, kind of going down ourselves.
Yeah. Um, I'm reminded a little bit all of a sudden too of Naaman, the Syrian. If the prophet had asked you to do something very difficult, would you not have done it? And I think sometimes that letting go, um, it's such a small thing in a sense. Like you're not being asked to do that much, and yet because it is such a small thing, it's so hard to do. The connection I'm starting to form in my head as we're going through this is, um, the for coronavirus, so many people are being asked to stay at home and to avoid other people, and it's a small thing, but it's
Mm,
very hard to do. And I think a lot of people want to take some kind of a bold stand and fight this somehow by courageously having a party, or like I'm going to go out there, I'm going to do something, I'm going to show them, I'm going to fight. You can't fight a virus physically, so I'm going to fight policy or something. And
mm.
you know, uh, but the best way to fight this is through meekness.
Yeah, that's a great connection. Wow. Yeah.
You know, kind of taking the smaller road here and diminishing a little bit in what we choose to do, and then ultimately to come back in new life, hopefully.
Mm. Yeah. Well, and maybe, yeah, don't wait until things are totally desperate,
Yeah.
before allowing God to come to meet you in this place wherever you are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, it's a sort of cliche, but um, maybe you've heard this phrase. It's been common in all of the Protestant churches I've ever been a part of, that you don't know how much you need God until God is all that you have.
I've heard
Um,
similar things. Yeah, or addiction. Sometimes people will say that you can't get better until you hit the bottom. It's
yeah,
not true.
yeah. Don't wait until like you literally have nothing else but God to
Yeah,
realize that God is what truly matters in your life more than anything
yeah,
else.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's good.
All
I
right.
think I think I think that's a good word of hope for people who may be listening to this and are
I hope
isolated. And
so. I hope
yeah,
so. It can seem like you're not doing much, but you're saving the world by not doing much. And how often can you
yeah.
say that? um, yeah.
Wow.
Uh, Anything else that caught your attention here?
Um, I think that's good. I think that's a good
Yeah, good
place.
place to stop. So,
Yeah.
thank you everyone for watching, whether you're here in Corfu or elsewhere. As always, hopefully everyone will keep doing this on a regular basis going
Let's do it.
forward. It's been really enjoyable for me, and hopefully this helps our preaching in the weekends, even if we keep doing this once we're out of quarantine or whatever you want to call it. Um,
That's right.
but thank you very much for joining, and see you next week.
All right. Thanks.
All
See ya.
right.